And joining us now with more on the global response to Palestinian terrorism and to anti-Semitism is human rights lawyer, author, filmmaker, and executive director of the Lawfare Project, Brooke Goldstein. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So, Brooke, the aftermath of the terror attacks continuing, and Israelis are still so astounded to see some of the coverage and responses to Palestinian terrorism. How have the past weeks' or days' events been covered internationally compared with the reality we see here in Israel?
Really, everybody should be astounded at how terribly the reporting has been on these incidents. I think, in my opinion, the two worst offenders right now are both UK-based, The Guardian and The Times. Both published articles that whitewashed Palestinian Islamic terrorism, that are borderline historical revisionism. And in my opinion, these articles are aiding and abetting the genocidal attacks against the Jewish people, because what they're doing is they're justifying it. The Guardian was terrible in its reporting. Instead of saying that these two girls were killed, were murdered, they said they just simply died in a shooting incident, as though it's some lone wolf attack that came out of nowhere. Some stray bullet hit these girls instead of an intentional terrorist attack that was meant to kill two innocent young women, and also now their mother, who passed away out of Jew hatred, genocidal Jew hatred.
Now, you would think that the world would show solidarity with victims of terror, but instead we have seen, as you mentioned, skewed coverage, victim blaming. Why does this continue to be the case when it comes to Israel?
I think that the Jewish people need to wake up, because we are absolutely alone. The mainstream media has for quite some time justified terrorist attacks against Israelis, against Jewish people, because we are Jewish. You would think the world would be absolutely outraged at the fact that millions and millions of dollars, especially from the United States, from the United Nations, are going towards indoctrinating innocent Muslim children to become suicide bombers, to become child soldiers, to act as human shields. But of course they're not outraged, because as long as these innocent Muslim children are used to kill Jews, that is justifiable. And I think also we have to pay attention to what the United Nations Special Rapporteur Francesca Albanese said, because it's quite significant. This woman is apparently a lawyer, and she came out with a statement saying that Israel, the Jewish people, have no legal right, no right in international law to defend themselves against terrorism. That is absolutely wrong. And it could not betray her anti-Semitism more. She could not show the world how deeply biased and anti-Semitic she is by making such a statement public, that Israel does not have a right to defend itself against terrorism. She is absolutely wrong. The most important thing I want to stress is for every viewer today to go to The Guardian and The Times UK social media, go on these articles and comment on the articles. Express how displeased you are and express your disgust at the historical revisionism that is taking place and the justification for murder. Because what these papers are doing, and what someone like Francesca Albanese is doing, is aiding and abetting the premeditated murder of innocent Jewish children, innocent Jewish women, innocent Jewish people, by covering up the indoctrination, the pay for slay, and by making excuses for genocidal terrorism. That is what is going on right now. And Jewish people, both in the diaspora and in Israel, need to wake up.
And you mentioned Francesca Albanese. There are now calls for her removal. But, you know, what can Israel as a country do to counter these false narratives and this hate that we're seeing today?
Well, first of all, absolutely, this woman, Francesca Albanese, must be removed. She has shown that she is not objective. In fact, the entire pseudo legal investigation against Israel needs to conclude, because the United Nations is not an objective party. Anyone with a brain knows that. Anyone can see how the United Nations is funding schools through its UNRWA program, the United Nations Relief and Works Agency program, which literally hires teachers off the Hamas payroll, Hamas being a designated terrorist group, which allows Hamas to come in and recruit children to become suicide bombers and child soldiers. If anything, the United Nations must be held legally accountable for its participation in genocidal terror. And frankly, I think what Israel needs to do is revoke the journalistic credentials of these so-called journalists who are just appalling in their violation of any types of journalistic standards when it comes to the reporting.
And Brooke Goldstein, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us today about this important issue.
Thank you for covering this.